Hello, career thought leaders. It's good to see you today. And we're going to be looking at some of the latest recruiting trends data and what's going on in how recruiters are searching. We're also going to look at a few sites that show this process and how it's really, for a while, been about more than keywords. So, when we think about how recruiters use AI or they use tools, the challenge with a lot of this is that it's varied, right? People use it differently, and that a lot of times the surveys ask questions in a way that aren't very helpful, aren't very specific. So, we're going to look at some of these surveys today and just want to look at it, see how we can take it for our use, and look at just some of the changes that are happening in how things are done and what that means for our work. So, how are recruiters using these tools in general? What are they doing? And how can we use that for our clients? Say hello. Let me know that you're joining me in the chat, and let's dive in to some of this data. So, the first data that we're going to look at is from an Insights Global piece survey, and an eightfold AI survey. So this first one's actually from Eightfold, and what Eightfold was looking at, they've got a lot of pages, a lot of pages in this report. If you would like the report, drop me a note and I'll send it to you so that you can look at it. But one of the pieces that I found interesting was how people are using these tools. Now, this really talking about AI specifically. And we have to be a little bit careful about that when people talk about AI. Sometimes it's used in I just want to look cool, so I'm going to say AI way. And it's not really that different than what they've been doing before. And remember that applicant tracking systems and even some of the things we're going to talk about today have been going on for a long time. They've been going on since about 2018, when some of the technology we'll look at today, I was showing videos of preview tools like that way back then. Hi, Kathy. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining. Hi, Lori. Good to see you. So this is talking about what types of tools they're using. 73% using an applicant tracking system. Does that mean it's doing anything besides just tracking the applicants, right? Looking at them, storing them, etc.? Not necessarily. Job boards and aggregators, always interesting and somewhat fascinating that at this day and age, there's still so many recruiters using job boards. I hear a lot of talk about how they're not effective anymore and all of that, but all these surveys still show a really high use of job boards. Candidate sourcing platforms. So it says LinkedIn Recruiter, but that is also like the tools, one of which we're going to look at today. And find them, seek out, Araya, the tools, and even JobBite has this functionality where it will go and find people that fit a certain profile. Social recruiting tools, assessments, which are on the rise. A lot more of assessments going on to try to get around the fact that everybody's resume sounds the same, which is something we're going to be talking about today. So these are the important tools that recruiters are using. But the challenge is, how are they using it? How are they using AI? And that's also hard to talk about because there's great diversity, but we do have a survey that we can look at that talks a little bit more about that. So here's one of the challenges for our recruiters and for people in general is that when they're using these tools, they're getting applicants in who today all sound the same. Everybody can keyword optimize. And some of the research that we were looking at for our latest newsletter talked about what they called a signaling crisis, and kind of an interesting word. My screen seems to be frozen and I'm just stuck over here as a little thing, but that's okay. They called it a signaling crisis. And the signaling crisis is because someone's content in their resume no longer signals that they are a qualified professional. So we're getting this content that sounds great, right? It has all the right keywords, but it may or may not mean that someone actually has the information that they're supposed to have to be a good candidate. And so if you didn't see it in our newsletter, first of all, I would say go to your promotions tab, check your promotions tab, because I know we're falling into the promotions tab for a lot of folks. But the other thing is that if you're not subscribed, you can do that. We'd love to have you subscribe. We're putting part of that content on our website now. So if you go to our website, and we've got some of these blogs up, our latest one is about polish talk and signaling challenges. And this article talks about how in hiring, they did a study that showed people who weren't as qualified got hired more often because they had the right keywords in their resumes. What this tells me is that keyword optimization, even if the other things we're going to talk about today weren't true, keyword optimization is no longer a way to rise to the top. Most people are doing it. It's easy. And hiring managers are starting to figure out that keyword density doesn't really mean anything, right? All it means is that, oh, yay, you could use AI to write your resume. And so they're looking for a few other things that we're going to talk about here today. I'm not going to keep my screen up the whole time, but in here, you'll find this research around the simulated hiring environments. Everybody's got the keywords. You'll also find the research on the achievement to duty ratio and how that has become more important, which all of us resume writers are cheering, right? Because we've been teaching that forever. We've been teaching the importance of this, of achievements. And then also it talks about the eye tracking study, one of the newest eye tracking studies that goes through how readers are reading, which isn't any different than the eye tracking study we've been sharing since 2015, which came out in 2008. They just keep repeating the same study because neuroscience is neuroscience, and the way we read is the way we read. And so we'll go through a few of the takeaways from that here in just a second. But I do want to try to drop this link in here, and so you don't have to poke around on the website to find it. It doesn't go to LinkedIn, so I will try to go to LinkedIn and drop it there as well. But if you don't see it there, come back and we will get it there as soon as we can. So this the proliferation of AI use, what it means is that everybody's got the same stuff in their resumes, and it's less credible. We don't know if this is true about you. We don't know if you're actually the one writing it or not. So what this has done to recruiters is they've said, okay, how can I figure out if what you're talking about is actually real, if it's actually you? And that's why we get the accomplishment to duty ratio, which just kind of makes me giggle because, again, it's something we've been doing and using forever. It's not necessarily new. It's just a fancy term for something we've been talking about forever. And now you have like this fancy word that you can use with your job seekers, right? The accomplishment to duty ratio and how important it is. So it's real life examples. It's real world. Are you talking about what you do in a way that sounds credible? So that as a hiring manager or a reader, I'm getting good signals that you're a real person and that you've actually done what you say you can do. That's what we're going for. Now, the execution of it really isn't any different than what we've been doing, that the professional resume writers have been doing forever. What stories matter? How do you tell the story? Get that in there with the specifics. Yes, quantification is great when we can do it, but industry terms, industry signals, in details about how they did it, that shows the skill. All of those pieces make it something that is credible and specific. And it really doesn't matter if people get help from AI writing it, as long as it has those signals. Challenge for most people, of course, is that when they use AI to do the work, they take out all of those signals and it ends up being very, very vanilla. So that's what we want to avoid. And in our work, sorry, I was trying to see if I could figure out how to make it not have me by a screen. But in our work, when we're doing things, there's been a reason the whole time, and now it's just being promoted as, hey, this is an important thing to do, especially with the use of AI and everything being more generic. However, keywords and keyword matching is not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about really understanding the job, the context, the industry, and writing statements that connect with that, that use the industry language, that demonstrate that we are in and knowledgeable of the industry or the role. When someone's transitioning, that gets a little bit more challenging, but we can still do it. The specifics that matter, not the specifics that don't. Here's the very interesting thing that I found, and I'm sure this is out there in other places, but I found this on the website for one of the AI tools that does Eightfold. So we were just looking at their research, now looking at how does this actually happen. So talent matching is gone. The keyword matching is gone. And actually, it's interesting. I don't know. They don't have a date on this because it's not an article. It's part of their website. But the video of how Araya worked that I used to share back in 2018 talked about this same thing. So whether it's just a resume or it's a resume and their online profile, and it kind of depends on the system that you use, whether it can do just the resume or the resume and the profile, but it's putting together a semantic search, which means it's not just based on keywords, but it's based on patterns. And they're looking at how does the person's patterns match the profile of the job and the points at which they connect. And when you look at the system and the patterns, it isn't about matching really anymore. It's about fit and alignment. And fit can be used as a bad word. So I don't want it to sound like, fit in terms of diversity. Actually, the hope is that this could increase diversity because you're looking at patterns of jobs that have been held, not pattern and skills that have been used, not just job titles, right? We're going beyond titles. The semantic search allows us to go beyond titles to look at skills used and how that aligns with the job that we're hiring. So it should actually help someone who is transitioning because it's not looking at the specific title that they held or the industry that it was in, but looking at how the patterns of what they did align with what the job is looking for. So this article walks through, that they're looking at, it's very technical, vectors and pre-trained language models. They're looking for patterns, and they're looking for what is the real pattern of skills in this job and how does that match what might be on the person's resume. It goes beyond the exact keywords used, and it'll be interesting to see how some of the tools that people are using to score resumes are kind of giving you a false positive, like, yay, you match 80% of the keywords. However, if those are stuck in there in a way that doesn't match the patterns, it's still not going to connect. And it may be, we may say, oh, that's not really possible because of course the patterns are going to match if the keywords are in there, but not necessarily. I mean, we've all seen clients who try to keyword stuff in weird ways or whatever, and they didn't really go deep enough into communicating what they've done to make it align. They just stuffed the keywords in there. It's not going to work, right? So I wanted to show you that, even though it's a little messy and not maybe that easy to see, before we went to the next data point, because I know some recruiters are not going to love this. I didn't do the survey. It's not me. This is the Insight Global survey. And I shared part of this on my LinkedIn a few weeks ago, where it showed that 100% of hiring managers are using AI tools. And then I didn't emphasize the first post again, because I know recruiters out there don't love it and people misinterpret what it means. But if you scroll down through this, they talk about how they're using the tools, scheduling interviews, doing training, skills assessments. And so, yes, they're using AI-powered skills assessments that make it easier to tell if if the person is using that or not. The numbers here are a lot different than the last numbers we just saw, where I think it was 30 something are you doing skills assessments. So I'm guessing there's a little technical bias in this survey specifically. Must be a more technical audience. But then it talks about down here a little bit how they're using AI, what they think AI will do for them. And then this is the data point that I think a lot of people aren't going to love. 92% of hiring managers saying they're using AI for screening resumes or in pre-screening interviews. So 92% using AI in screening resumes or pre-screening interviews. That's a lot. Again, I think there's a little technical bias to this survey because I haven't seen numbers this high in other surveys, but it is still high. It tells you a little bit about other uses for AI, and we go back to scheduling and those types of things. But 92% screening resumes or pre-screening interviews. Remember, that doesn't mean automated rejections, because even if we're doing this assessment process and we're trying to see if the person aligns with the role, that does not mean we're automatically eliminating the people that don't. Nobody trusts the system that much right now. We're still going to look, we're still going to review, we're going to see, do they fit? And the pre-screening interviews is lumped in here. So it doesn't tell us like who's using what. Yeah, I think those are two big things to lump together, right? So yes, these tools are becoming more common. They are Fold, their Araya, their Seekout, their JobVite, all of those tools use this similar process. I think Eightfold is just kind of one of the boldest to kind of put it out there and talk about how it really works because they're trying to sell their system to other companies and other users. But this is happening. It doesn't mean automated rejection. It does mean that skill clusters and skill density matters in the resume, but those skills have to be in context to connect with the pattern recognition. They can't just be in a list. Now, Martin Redstone, who was speaking at our Career Jam, he talked about how when you're doing, skill clustering, talking about the skills that you've used in that area beyond just the ones that are on the job description helps because that creates the pattern, right? He calls it skill graphing. I would be careful with that term because we're not talking about going to Canva and creating a little graph of, here's how great my skills are. No. We're talking about density and data mapping. So if I've got 1, 2Z, 3Z skills here, that's not as strong as if I've got a cluster of skills around this type of work. It doesn't always have to be technology, although I feel like technology kind of brings the best examples. But if you're in marketing, right, instead of just having content creation, you'd have all the skills that go around that are similar to that. That would create that strong cluster of, yes, this person has strong skills in content creation. When you have that pattern, then it says, okay, all of these things come together. When we are writing resumes, we're not necessarily changing the process. We're just being more mindful of the fact that we have to build the strategy from the bottom up, from understanding the company, the needs, the industry, the skills that are really important beyond what's on the job description, so that we can build the content to speak to the patterns and the clusters, not just the individual keyword match. And that's powerful, right? Because it means that now instead of the surface level, whatever we might say to an AI, people were doing it before AI of, fix my resume or put these keywords in my resume, the old search and replace. Yes, that can be done at some level, but if that's all you're doing and you're not looking at the deeper strategy, you're not going to match the pattern recognition that's going on. That's more important than the keyword match. And, does that make the keyword match scores that some people are getting not that great? I do think it can be a false goalpost that you're working towards to get that high number of match, because again, it still may not mean that you're aligned at the pattern recognition level. thinking about how we do that, right? We start with the understanding of the company, the industry, the job. We say, okay, when have we demonstrated those skills? How have we demonstrated them? What are the stories? And then how do I work those stories into bullets and then go back and make sure that the language aligns? It's resume writing 101 with that strategy being critical and every piece of content on the resume being thought of as a proof point, right? That accomplishment to duty ratio. And that's even more important for the soft skills. Please don't list a whole bunch of soft skills in the skills list, even if they're in the job descriptions, because they don't have any context. And sure, that might help you get through the scoring, but then the human reads it and just gags on all of this fluff that we've put in there. The other thing I would say, and there's been a lot of conversation about this, is do you need a summary of your resume? If it's going to be bad, sure, leave it off. But in a world where the TLDR has become the default, right? The too long didn't read, I think it's hilarious that we're talking about taking a summary off of a resume, which is and should be the TLDR, the underlying foundation of who you are and how you're qualified for that job without the fluff, right? No fluff, no descriptors, no adjectives, just the concrete information that shows you are qualified for that job. And the challenge for most of our clients is that we spend so much time talking about who we are in very fluffy language that tends to be what comes out. And our role, our goal is to help them dig deeper and really think about how that connects to the job and to who they are through accomplishments, not through fluff and descriptors and adjectives. And it's a different way of building a brand, but it's actually so much stronger when we can make it happen. And of course, I know some of you are doing that. So one of the things that people ask me a lot is, Marie, can you show us some examples of what this might look like? And so I thought, well, okay, we could do that. I'm going to share you a few examples from our leadership resumes session that we did last year or early the year before, so that we can look at what some of these samples might look like, if my computer will cooperate. So the idea behind this is, how are we pulling together a summary that speaks to what we want to speak to? And I don't have the strategy behind all of these. I'm just going to show you a few examples. So we get one short statement that talks about who the person is, a little bit about their expertise. Again, it's okay as long as we don't drone on and on. Then we get right into the career highlights. These are going to be carefully curated to align to the job's needs, to the hiring manager, to the job, to the industry needs. That's what our goal is. If it's fluff, it doesn't work. If it's accomplishments that are completely out of context, it doesn't work. If it's accomplishments that may be great but don't align to the job, it doesn't work. Now, I will say that recruiters may not read this section. They're not the only readers of the resume, right? Your hiring manager might go here first. You don't want to overdo it. We don't want it to be too long. And again, it's got to be the things that matter the most. Other thing is, if you put an accomplishment up here in the summary, it also has to go in the resume where it belongs for those readers who skip this section. It's got to be a little bit different, right? The summary is the summary. It's not the same as the detail that you have in the experience section. So we're not duplicating content. We're making it a summary of things. And then we've got some keywords here, and we always want to keep those focused at the right level. I see a lot of high-level resumes that have the wrong level of skills in the skills section, and hard skills, not interpersonal communication skills, right? We don't want to have those in there. So that's just one example of how we can go through, we can look at a resume and we can put it together. I'll find one more here to share with you because I know this is something people want to see more of based on our conversation yesterday. And we had a great conversation yesterday, by the way. If you're looking at the our monthly calls where you get to join us via Zoom. We have one every month, talk about trends, and then talk about the questions that people have. I love them. They're so much fun. And it also gives you a little bit of preview of our programs and our free resources. So here's just one more example. I'm not a huge fan of the graphics that don't say anything, but we can't win all the time. Then we've got a statement, branding statement here, specific accomplishments, and then areas of expertise. People always say, oh, do you need the title areas of expertise? You probably don't, but if it creates nice spacing and it doesn't waste too much space, go for it. I like the skills listed like this, where they're not taking up a ton of time and space versus using a table or whatnot, because it's just clean and easy to read in the areas of expertise area. So keep it tight, because yes, you might need them in there. Some recruiters like them, and they kind of help with keywords, but again, we're looking for context, not matching. So it's not like putting a bunch of keywords in there is going to make you score better. You're doing it for the reader. You're doing it to highlight the things that are most important. You're doing it to create those skills clusters, but they're not differentiating. So don't take up a ton of space. You get 3, maybe 4 lines, and then you need to move on with life and put in the accomplishments that are going to be differentiating and credibility building. So let's talk about where we've been. We're thinking about how recruiters are using these tools. They are still using job boards at certain levels, right? It's going to depend on the type of position. They are using these tools and increasingly adopting these tools that do semantic search, not keyword matching. They are not auto-rejecting. They're using it to filter, to pull people out of the database, and yes, maybe to rank in order depending on how their process works. If you get an automated rejection, it is most likely because a question was answered in the beginning of the process in a way that didn't align with the needs. Do you have, the authorization to work in this country? Maybe do you have X many years of experience, et cetera? Those knockout questions at the beginning. Or could just be a late night recruiter or someone around the globe who's doing that initial screen. When we do the strategy piece, it's thinking about from the ground up. What is the industry trend? What does the company need? What does the job description say? And how do I build that foundation to show that I align with the job, that I align with the patterns, not just the words. The words are a part of it, but they're the top level, not the bottom level where we need to start. You've got recruiters using these tools, not just to search through their own database, but also to search online. And having these same markers out there in your professional presence online is critical. It's not just about your LinkedIn profile. It's about your activity, your presence, anything you've got beyond your LinkedIn profile. You're more credible if you show up more often, right? On your company website, on a professional association website, in a podcast, all of those things build your credibility markers and your pattern recognition connected to the pattern of the job that you're doing. That makes you stand out. It makes you rise to the top, whatever you want to say. When you do the keywords in your resume, thinking about those clusters and having density in the skills that really matter means you got to do your research so you can build it from the ground up. Now, if you are a professional resume writer and you're thinking about, how do I do this? How do I want to do this? Is this still a skill that people need to pay for? I think that as we're talking through today, the answer to that is yes. An AI can't do this. Most people still can't do it. In fact, the bar has been raised even higher now that we're not talking about keyword matching and we're talking about the importance of sending these credibility signals. People might today be trying to write their own resumes. I think that experiment will die quite quickly. Will companies move away from resumes? Maybe eventually, but that is a slow moving train, and they're just going to replace it with some other way for the person to communicate their stories, to communicate their skills. They'll still need to be able to tell those stories. They'll still need to be able to, write them somewhere, and we will still be needed to help them do that. Our resume writing class starts on December 1st, where we go through how to build the strategy, how to use AI in a good way that adds value, not in a way that sends the wrong signals, so that you can help clients differentiate while writing better and faster in your work or in their work if you're teaching them how to do it for themselves. So it's very fun. If you're in the US, I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving. We will be back next Tuesday for another Trend Tuesday Live. And if you ever have topics you think we should cover or questions you want me to answer, feel free to drop them in the comments or send me a message on any of the platforms, and we'd love to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel or you haven't hit follow on that LinkedIn company page, do that so that you get notified every time we go live. And we'll see you next Tuesday for Trend Tuesday Live.